Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from ContentBot. My name is Dylan, I'm the CTO here at ContentBot, as well as one of the lead developers on the project. In this video, I'd like to take a look at the Blueprints feature. This is a new exciting feature from our team, which we've been working on for the better part of the last month. Blueprints are effectively just templates for types of documents that you'd like to create. This could be anything from a blog post all the way through to a sales email. The power really is in your hands as the blueprint creator, as you'll be adding different commands from top to bottom, and as those run, they will output content into a document. Another powerful feature for blueprints is the ability for them to retain context thanks to certain variables that are exposed. So let's take a look at an example here. We'll open this blog post example. So here we are in the blueprint viewer. Now, I didn't create this blueprint, so I don't have the ability to edit any of the content, but I could use this blueprint as it stands here and simply run the commands to create a simple blog post. I could clone the blueprint, which would allow me to add new commands or change the way things will work, or I could simply upvote it to tell the rest of the community that this is a pretty good blueprint to use. I can also see things like who created the blueprint. In this case, it's ContentBot because all of the featured blueprints at this moment are curated by our team. However, later on, that content will be community driven and you'll be able to share your blueprints with the rest of the ContentBot community. We can see the last time it was updated, so perhaps the original author improved the overall quality of the outputs by changing the way they run their commands. We can also see how many times this blueprint has been used to create a document, which is usually a pretty good indicator of how popular it is, as well as the amount of upvotes it's received. We do want to create our own blueprint. However, this video isn't really focused on going into too much depth on how these commands work just yet. So instead of starting with a blank slate, let's start by cloning this blueprint. If we click on the clone button here, we'll actually create our own blueprint based off of this blueprint. So here we can see we have a post clone. So we can just rename this to my blog post, right? At this point, we have full edit functionality available to us. You'll notice that this editor is quite a bit different from the long form editor. That's because we really wanted the focus here to be on the commands and how they execute to generate new content. So before we get into changing this blueprint a little bit for our own use case, let's take a look at the cheat sheet, which is on the left-hand side. You'll see that this section is split up into two parts. The first is our variables section, which holds all the variables that are available to this blueprint. If we were to create our own variables using the define command, they would show up in this top panel and we could use them wherever we see fit. These variables are interactable, meaning that we can change some of these commands by simply clicking within the parameters object and adding the variable we want to use. In this case, it'll use the document title and the document content, everything above that line, to generate the summary. This is very useful for retaining context. Of course, we could add more variables that we might need for our blueprint, something like a username to do a greeting for a sales email, as an example. In the section below, we have a list of all the commands available, as well as which services they use. So you'll notice that all of the AI-powered commands are powered by OpenAI. Then we have some SEMrush tools, as well as some internal tools that we use to do things like insert text or variables, define new variables, or count words, for example. So what we've done here is in the summarize command, we've added the topic, which will help retain context more effectively. And perhaps we want to just write in conclusion over here, or in summary to be accurate. We can still do very basic formatting, like bold that text if we wanted to, and that would carry through all the way to the document editor as well. But perhaps we don't want to necessarily ask questions. Maybe our blog post shouldn't be sort of in a frequently asked format. So let's have a look at some alternatives that we have here. Perhaps we'd prefer to create a listicle. So we can see that the formatting for this command is very, very similar. So we'll go ahead and just change over this phrase to the listicle command. So we'll just go here. Instead of question, we'll say we want to do a listicle on the topic. Perhaps we also don't need to write the intro topic, so we'll take that out for our use case. And then finally, we don't want to necessarily answer questions because now we're working with listicles. Instead, we just want to write some sections about that item. So we'll just go /paragraph. Of course, if you need any help understanding these commands, we do have documentation on each of these commands, as well as the cheat sheet on the left-hand side, which you can use to quickly understand how things will work. So if we look at the paragraph, it'll write a paragraph about a subject, and all we need to pass in is the subject. In this case, we'll be passing in the line, which is each line from the listicle. So let's assume that we're happy with our new formatted blueprint. We'll save our blueprint, and when we're ready, we could hit Use to create a new document. Before we do that, let's just go and have a look at the blueprints area again. Now that we're back here, you can see that we now have our own blueprint. We can see it's listed over here. My blog post, a simple blog post example. It has not been used yet, and it was created today. Of course, from here, I can edit, use, duplicate, or delete it. I can also switch over to the grid view if I prefer, and still access all the tools available to that blueprint. With that said, let's go ahead and use this to create a new document. Now we're going to be using the Use shortcut over here to create a document from this blueprint. However, we could have edited this blueprint and then clicked the Use button as well if we preferred. So here we are in our brand new document. As you can see, this has been created using our blueprint. That means that the title has been set to match our blueprint, and our content has been set to match our blueprint's content as well, which includes all of the commands. Now our latest version of the editor also has full access to each of the commands and the cheat sheet, so if you ever want to swap out a command that is part of a blueprint that you're cloning or using for your own documents, you can do so by just referencing these commands on the side. We'll be running this as is just for demonstration purposes. So we can see here that our blueprint depends heavily on the topic, so we're going to change our topic to something more relevant. So wherever the blueprint calls for the topic variable, this value will be used instead. We can test this now by pressing Command Enter or Control Enter depending on the platform that you're on. In my case, it's Control Enter. So you'll see there that it has just written my article or my document title into the body. At this point, I can do some styling if I want to. For the next step, we'll be creating a listicle based on the topic. And then for each of our lines, we'll create a paragraph. That's what this post-processor here does. It'll make a lot more sense once I run it, but if you want to learn more about post-processing and commands in general, please watch the in-depth command video and consult the documentation that we'll be releasing along with these features so that you can get a good understanding of how everything works together. Now, because we're using listicles, we do need to retain the topic subject matter for each of our lines as well. So we'll use the topic variable in here to help generate interesting paragraphs instead of just feeding in a few words based on the listicle topics. So if we run this command and allow it to process for a second or two, we can see here that we have a new subject heading. So start with a title. And then we see a new command. So this listicle command created the paragraph command for us, which means a lot less work for us to create this article. And in here, we'll use the line as well as the topic. The topic will be inserted once we hit Control or Command Enter once again. So hit Control Enter. And we can see now it gets really interesting because we have context. So context can be a really powerful tool when creating AI-driven content. Again, we can do it here. So we hit Control Enter and we're allowing it to process for a couple of seconds. You can see how powerful a tool like this can be when used effectively. So let's go ahead and just clean up some of these final items. I think let's get rid of a few. Might be a bit much. So we'll just Control Enter over here again, or Command Enter if you're on Mac, just a reminder. So you can see now that by using the topic variable, as well as the 2 or 3 word listicle titles generated by the AI, we can create contextual outputs instead of just random bits of information that may lose focus along the way. So here we'll do the last one now. So this one maybe lost track a little bit, and just a reminder that all of this output still needs to be fact checked. If you're using any data that needs to be factual, you should be fact checking the outputs on your own, as the AI simply does not know whether or not things are factual or fictional. And finally, we have our summary command down here, or summarize, which will use the topic, which is what we've got in the top here, just as a reminder, as well as the content variable down here. Now the content variable uses all content above the line that we're about to run. It allows us to really get a good summary or content generation out. So you can see here, in summary, if you want to write compelling content, be respectful of the reader's time and attention, and use strong verbs to make your blog post more compelling and professional. Now, what's interesting about that last command is the fact that it used all of this content to come up with that summary, which again, that is a powerful concept with blueprints. And with that all said and done, I'd like to thank you all very much for your time in the introduction to blueprints, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions regarding blueprints, how they work, and how to get started. We'd be happy to help.